ജർമ്മനിയിലെ ബെർലിനിലുള്ള ഹെർട്ടി സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് ഗവർണൻസിലെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുമായി രാഹുൽ ഗാന്ധി സംവദിക്കുന്ന വീഡിയോയുടെ രണ്ടാം ഭാഗമാണ് ഇത്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ സംവാദം തുടങ്ങുന്നതിനു മുൻപുള്ള ഇൻട്രോഡക്ടറി സ്പീച്ചും വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുടെ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉത്തരം നൽകുന്ന വീഡിയോയുടെ ആദ്യ ഭാഗവും സമയം പോലെ കാണാൻ മറക്കരുത്. ഓർക്കണം, ഇതൊന്നും മുൻകൂട്ടി തയ്യാറാക്കി നൽകിയ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ അല്ല. റാൻഡമായി വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾ റാൻഡം ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുന്നതാണ് എന്നുള്ളത്. പിന്നെ ഇതുവരെ ചാനൽ സബ്സ്ക്രൈബ് ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒന്ന് സബ്സ്ക്രൈബ് ചെയ്യണമേ.
Hi, I'm Nima. I'm Hertie alumni, and I'm from your neighboring country, Nepal. So my question to you is,
you've got a new government. We see.
Interim government, and we are going into election soon. So my question.
How's that going?
So far, it's going good. We are at least in a good pace, but I don't know how the future looks like. There are so many external actors playing around. So which we are.
Who are the external actors?
There are, especially it's the Gen Z that they call, but even a lot of Gen Zs are divided.
Right.
So there are every podcast and every interview is coming from different Gen Z groups. So we are a bit concerned about that, but hopefully everything turns out well. So my question is also kind of revolving around that area. In this day and age of algorithmic divided world and driven world, what advice do you want to give to emerging leaders who are more tempted towards adopting more populist way of strategy to mobilize their support and campaigns? How can leaders can adopt more radical listening and then be more kind to and empathetic towards each other rather than being divided? So that's my question.
What's your time frame? Yeah, what's your time? What time frame are you thinking about? Are you thinking about 3-year time frame? Or are you thinking about a 6-year time frame? Or are you thinking about a 20-year time frame? Because the answer would be different.
I would say long term.
Long term. Then, if you're not in a hurry, this is a problem. When a lot of guys come like this, and they don't actually understand, not you, but they don't actually understand what it takes to do politics. It's not a fun thing. It really isn't a fun thing. Okay? So the short-term guys will come in and say, I want to do this. They'll identify a problem. Maybe they'll say, I want to be a member of parliament. And then they will go in and they will work on becoming a member of parliament. Right? So that's what I mean when I say short-term. Now, that's a totally different idea. And you can do that. And a lot of people do that. Somehow for me that wasn't interesting. So then there's another system. And the other system is you go into yourself and you say, okay, what is the thing that I will defend? No matter what happens. The one thing or the two things that I will defend. And then you defend those things. Whatever it is. Now what happens in that system is it looks like you're going nowhere for a long time. And people will say, this guy's crazy, normally. But after some time, you start to get traction. So it's like, how compounding works? You know how compounding works? It's like that. So when you start compounding, you can't really see anything. And then you're like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And then suddenly, the thing starts to move. I had a thing in my mind when I was your age, which was that, can you actually do politics by being truthful? Everybody told me you can't. Everybody says, listen, if you're truthful, forget it. And then I realized it's actually the people who are doing the short-term game who are thinking that. Because if you're playing the 5-year game or the 6-year game, then yes. If you're truthful to somebody and, he's going to decide whether you're MP or not, you're not becoming MP. But if you're thinking longer term, then the truthful stuff becomes gold. Then it really starts to work. So there are these two types of politicians. One who compounds trust. And it's quite fascinating what starts to happen when you do it seriously. It's actually mind-blowing. It takes a long time, and people think you're crazy. People really think this guy is nuts. But after some time, the thing starts to work. I'll go to restaurants, and people I don't know will say to me, we love you. Just like that. And I discovered this. I'm still answering your question, by the way. And I discovered this which is that I used to start the thing as a politician, or maybe when you're doing public policy, you enter the room and you say, I know what has to be done. And actually, that's completely the wrong thing. The best thing to do is when you enter a room with 5-7 other people, you say, I actually don't know what needs to be done, and I'm going to listen to what they think needs to be done. And so you move from this thing of talking to yourself and building a little theory of the world in your mind and then trying to run it, to suddenly going quiet and listening to what is this guy now going to say. And then suddenly you start to see that, wow, I had no idea the level of understanding this farmer has. No idea. I mean, like now, I go to a farmer, I just shut up. I don't even talk. Because he's a master of his trade. And anything I tell him about what he does is actually meaningless. So to me, it becomes, once you say, okay, listen, I'm going to go down the trust route, then the next automatic step has to be, I'm going to go down the listening route. Because if I'm going to build trust with Sam and I don't listen to him, that's not happening. So that, to me, if you're serious about politics, that's where the real players are playing. If you're not serious, then do the 5-year thing, 7-year thing, 10-year thing. Maybe you'll succeed, maybe you'll burn out, but you won't enjoy yourself.
Okay. Hi, Rahulji. My name is Gayatri Shezwar, and I come from the state of Maharashtra, which has a rich history of resistance and currently a lot of anger with the way the state politics has been butchered. But since we are talking about learning to listen in a noisy world, in this time of total ideological and institutional capture by the ruling government, are we already beyond the point of no return when it comes to listening in the context of democracy and democratic processes? And as my friend Aishwarya put it very well, a lot of us who do not recognize the country that we grew up in anymore, we feel like you're kind of the only thing that's standing in between, like that democracy that we knew and this really dystopian reality. So, well, no pressure. But my point is, everything seems like noise. Where is the hope?
No. See, in the beginning I said, look, we had a model that worked for us from 1990 to, I'd say, 2012, 13. What Prime Minister Modi and the BJP and the RSS have done is they've extended that model. So if you look at what they're doing, they have essentially taken the economic ideas of Manmohan Singh and taken them right to the extreme, where we wouldn't take them and we wouldn't allow them to go. But what one has to realize is that the model has collapsed. And the entire conversation that is taking place now, including this conversation, is about what does the next model of Indian growth look like? What does that basic architecture look like? I can tell you already that what Mr. Modi is trying to do economically reached the end of its possibilities about 4 to 5 years ago. It's jammed. It cannot go further. He's got a problem because he's tied himself to 2 or 3 people who are not going to let it reverse. Right? So even if he decides now that he wants to build a different type of model, he can't do it. He's stuck. Because he's invested too much in the Adanis and the Ambanis of this world. They know, they control him. So the real interesting thing for me is, what does that new model look like? And what I alluded to here is that it has to have production, right? It has to have a production that occurs in a democratic environment. What he alluded, which broadly I agree with, is it has to have a vision for the environment. It has to have a vision for the weaker sections of society, but the more marginalized sections of society. But it has to create prosperity. It cannot just create prosperity for 10 businessmen or 50 businessmen or 100 businessmen. It won't work. So all the angst you're feeling is actually the collapse of a model. And the hope is, and in fact you people are going to help build it, the hope is, okay, so this is not working, what is the next idea? And by the way, don't think India hasn't gone through this. India has gone through this in a much bigger way before, right? If you imagine what we did in 1947, it was a much bigger transition than is taking place today. I'm not devoid of hope. I'm actually quite excited about what this thing looks like 5 years, 10 years into the future. And I'm interested in understanding what the different stakeholders feel about it, right? So I'm interested in understanding what students feel about where our education system should go. You shouldn't, and you come from the state, from the state where the core of the resistance to the RSS idea comes. So you are right there, you're where the battlefield is.
So the mic is over here. We'll take one more and then two questions in the middle because we also have to watch time. Go ahead.
May I use my mic runner privileges to plug in a question of my own, if that's okay? Hello, Mr. Gandhi. Thank you for being here today. My name is Michelle. I'm an MPP student. A lot of us here have worked in the policy environment in India. And it's very frustrating when good research, policy analysis, strategies are in the system, but they're put on the back burner because they're not about issues that are electoral agenda issues, but still very important. Press freedom, women's representation in politics, LGBTQ rights, climate is one of them. So as future policymakers and as citizens, my question is, do we just have to make peace with the fact that these issues will forever be back burner issues, and perhaps if there is space in the agenda, they might feature?
No, you'd be surprised at the amount of room that exists in our system for non-central issues. But you have to know how to drive them. So, for example, there are many such issues that can be driven very easily through Parliament if you get the right set of people interested in the issue. You can't ignore the democratic process. So you can't say that, listen, peripheral issues are going to be the center. They never. But you can be sensitive to peripheral issues, and you can have a mindset where you say, okay, this is not a central issue, but we'll make it important. For example, an issue that comes to mind is the tiger. Non-central issue, right? But became a very important issue because of how you framed it, right? So framing is very important. How you think about putting it across, how you think about framing it, how you're positioning the issue, that is what allows peripheral issues to become central.
Hi, my name is Ace Chowdhury. My dad is an immigrant from India. My mom's parents are Pakistani, and she was born and raised in Bangladesh and also immigrated to the States. My question for you is maybe changing the tone a little bit, but my question is, India has a growing defense dependence on Israel, as they are the largest importer of Israeli weapons. Nearly 40% of Israeli surveillance technologies and arms are bought by India. I know you're saying superpowers are dwindling, militarily, societally, and economically. How do you view the future risks of deepening this relationship with Israel while India seeks to position itself with autonomy as an independent global power?
No, we buy weapons. We buy weapons from a number of people. Yes, we buy weapons from Israel, we buy weapons from the Russians, we buy weapons from the Americans, we buy them from the French. And in a complex environment, we have to defend ourselves. We are trying to become self-sufficient in that space. There's a long distance to go, but we can't get away from the fact that we need to buy weapons from the best possible supplier. We're not going to buy second-rate weapons. We're going to buy the best weapons that we need. But on the matter of Israel, I think what Hamas did was absolutely wrong. But I think what Israel has done to the people of Gaza is absolutely wrong as well. And I think the bombing of women and children simply should not happen. So I think that is something that I feel strongly about. And I think responsible people should think about that, should think about what has happened.
Two final questions. Michelle has the mic. You have the mic, and then one bit more to the front. Somebody else has to grab it. If we can group them, if you hold your answer to the question, we have a little bit more time. So go ahead, please. Present yourself.
Thank you. Maximilian von Lahr. I'm the co-founder of the Indo-German Young Leaders Forum, an NGO we founded 10 years ago to bring India and Germany more closely together. Basically, a very long-run initiative. So I connected closely to what you said. If you want proper results, they will be 10, 20, 30 years down the line. So my question for you is not political, but really targeting the leaders that we are all achieving or trying to be at some point. So is there, with all the experience you had in meeting leaders around the globe, is there any advice that you could give German young leaders learning from India or from Indian leadership experiences and the other way around? Thank you.
The visual representation of a leader. If I ask you, can you visually, imagine a leader with people? What you see is a guy walking in front and a whole bunch of people walking behind, right? Right? My visual representation is walking behind them. So I really liked a Taoist quote I read once. I don't remember the exact quote, but basically it says that nobody hears or sees the work of a leader, and once it's done, they think they did it themselves. Right? So to me, a leader's much more about connection, about empathy, about listening, than about getting people to follow you. The following happens as a result of the listening and the empathy, and the following is almost a byproduct. So now this sounds esoteric and sounds as if it doesn't work, but it does. I do it all the time. I'll tell you, before I went walking, and actually I didn't walk 8,000 kilometers, it's wrong. I walked 4,000 kilometers from north to south, but then the one that went from east to west was a little bit of walking, but a lot of car. So you're giving me credit for something I didn't do. So I walked 4,000 from the southernmost tip to the northernmost tip. And I realized two things in that walk. The first one was that as a politician, I didn't even know how to listen to people. Like I didn't even begin to understand what it means to listen to people. Because I was always ready to, you're a politician, you want to tell people what you think. You already assume that I know better and I'm going to tell you what to think. This is the model. It's a model of all modern politicians. So the first thing I realized is actually I don't listen at all. And listening, by the way, includes listening is not talking to yourself while the other person is talking. You know what I mean? I'm listening to you and then I'm saying, yeah, okay, she's wearing a red shirt and all that. That's not listening. Listening is silence in your mind when the other person is talking. That you're looking and you're silent and there's nothing going on. And you're looking at what they're saying, you're looking at the way they're expressing themselves, you're looking at the tightness in their body, you're looking at that. So you're trying to make as deep a connection with the person as you possibly can. And you're giving them the stage, fully. And you're not trying to bounce around on the stage next to them. So that's the first thing. The second thing which completely blew my mind was we were walking on the Yatra. And I saw this guy trying to come in. There was a huge crowd there. We used to walk in the morning. And there was a huge crowd. And this guy was trying to come in. And the cops were stopping him. So they stopped him. First, he tried to come in, they stopped him, they hit him. And I looked and I was like, I told the guy who was walking with me, he's trying to talk to us, go and try and get him inside because it was a big crowd. Anyway, by the time he arrived there, the guy had gone. And then again, a few hours later, I saw him on this side, same thing, and he had gone. And this happened a couple of times. And then at the end, I said, listen, the moment you see that guy, please bring him here. I told my office guy. So the moment he saw him, he brought him. And when he brought him, that guy broke free of my office guy and came running. And then he started going like this to me. So I said, what? So he said, I know what you're doing. So I said, what am I doing? He says, no, I know what you're doing. So I said, what am I doing? And then he said in Hindi, Nafrat ke bazaar mein mohabbat ki dukaan khol rahe ho. Now, do you understand what I just said? What he said is that in a supermarket of hatred, you're opening a shop of love. And that thing, I went and gave a speech after that. And I said, I said that line. And that line went like a earthquake. It just literally went like an earthquake across the country. And then everybody asks me, how did you think that thing up? And I'm like, I didn't think that thing up. Right? That thing came to me from the crowd. So the other thing is that intelligence lies in the crowd. And you got to go listen for it. Intelligence is something that is innate, it's there. And it talks to you. And then I realized that whole yatra, it was talking to me. Not as an individual. It was talking as an individual. But it was talking as a group. That statement that guy made was not an individual statement. It was a statement that was in the mind of thousands of people. He just expressed it. So then I started to notice that this crowd is talking to me. Not as an individual person, but as an organism. So those are the two learnings that completely transformed the way I think about this. And I think those are central to leadership. I'm sitting with this group of people. There's an individual intelligence in you. There's also a connected intelligence in you that comes with your particular experience. I have to pay attention to both.
So thank you for all these answers. I saw Mujahid Sheikh had his hand up, and I would love to give you a lightning round question if it's very short and it can be answered with one sentence. If not, I'll have you walk up. But if you can, go ahead with the very final question.
I'm going to be very quick. So thank you very much. I think we're all very impressed, and thank you for showing up today and giving us the opportunity to listen to you. I wish you taught the policy process course to our students instead of me. So maybe at some point that happens. And I don't say this often, but my dad was a rickshaw driver in India, so I've broken that socioeconomic barrier to be here in Germany today as a professor at this place. But there are many like me in India who are unable to do that, especially from the community I come from, which is, the Muslim minority in India. I want to know what your vision is for them going forward, because I haven't really heard of that today in your talk. So if in a sentence you can say that.
For me, every single Indian, regardless of religion, language, what his father does, should have the freedom to have a vision of his own life and should be able to express that vision and act on that vision. I don't separate people in quadrants of language, religion, in my mind. And I don't like the idea that anybody should be scared in India. This disturbs me. So when the minority community feels scared in India, or the Dalit community feels scared in India, or the tribal community feels scared in India, or a woman who's walking outside at nights feels scared in India, I don't like that. And so for me, that is something that needs to be worked on. And that is something, to me, that is a vision of India where there is harmony and everybody can express themselves. You have a particular religious predisposition, somebody else has another one, there's no conflict between them. If you go to the root of all religions, you'll find they're saying very similar things. So to me, I value harmony, I value connection, I value respect, and I think an India that gives its people, all its people, respect, connection is the India that I would look forward to.
Now that's a closing word if I've ever heard one. So thank you very much, Mr. Gandhi.